Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that digs into the research, the articles, the expert takes, really trying to pull out the key insights for you. And today, we're heading into a really fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty complex area: India's evolving place in the world, both geopolitically and economically, especially under Prime Minister Modi. So, our mission for this deep dive is pretty ambitious. We want to unpack what's driving India's growing role globally. How is it juggling these intense relationships with the US, China, Russia? And then there's the whole domestic side, these huge economic reforms. Ambitious, definitely, but also facing real challenges that affect well over a billion people. We've been digging into a lot of material for this, some exclusive bits from Modi versus Trump.pdf, some really sharp analysis from The Economist. So yeah, get ready. We might challenge a few assumptions you have, maybe uncover some unexpected turns in India's story. Okay, let's start maybe with India's foreign policy and specifically that relationship with the United States. It seems like it's been on, well, shaky ground recently.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. For decades, it looked like this natural upward path, two big democracies getting closer. But the sources we looked at describe the last few years, particularly under the Trump administration, as having really upended that dynamic. They even call it a defining test.
A defining test. That's strong language. It suggests a real shift from how things were maybe expected to go.
Exactly. It's a significant departure. It wasn't just a small disagreement. It was fundamental friction emerging.
Right, and what were those friction points?
Well, it forced both sides to kind of reassess their views of each other.
And trade seems to have been a major flashpoint based on our sources.
Definitely.
We saw specific issues cropping up, often linked to that America First approach. Things like the U.S. putting new tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum.
Right.
And then something that sounds quite impactful, revoking India's GSP status, the generalized system of preferences.
Yes, the GSP.
For listeners maybe not familiar, that gave lots of Indian goods cheaper access to the U.S. market, right? A big deal.
A huge deal. Losing that preferential duty-free access was a real economic blow. And the reaction was pretty immediate.
India hit back.
It did. India felt squeezed, so it responded with its own retaliatory tariffs. We're talking about duties on things like, American almonds, apples, classic U.S. exports.
And there's a statistic in the research that really jumped out.
Ah, yes, the reciprocal tariff rate.
India's rate against the U.S. was apparently the highest among a list of countries studied, averaging around 27%. That seems remarkably high.
It is striking, isn't it? 27%. It tells you something about the level of friction.
So it wasn't just posturing. These were real economic barriers going up. What was the feeling behind these moves, beyond the numbers?
Well, it certainly goes deeper than just the trade figures. The sources use the word humiliated to describe how India felt about some of these U.S. actions.
Humiliated. Wow.
Yeah, and some in India apparently saw it as the U.S. almost pushing them back towards, well, older relationships, maybe with Russia or Iran, questioning the sincerity of the U.S. partnership.
And the view from the U.S. side?
Frustration. Growing frustration, according to the sources, with what they called India's parsimony, its reluctance to give ground, and its dithering on opening up its markets further.
Parsimony and dithering. Okay, so a lack of sufficient market access from the U.S. perspective.
Essentially, yes. The U.S. felt India wanted concessions but wasn't offering enough in return, sticking to its own sort of protectionist tendencies. It created a real deadlock.
But what makes this so, well, complicated is the security angle, right? This paradox.
Exactly.
On the one hand, the U.S. definitely sees India as crucial for security, especially with the Quad, the U.S., Japan, Australia, India group.
Right. Seen as a key part of balancing China and the Indo-Pacific.
But then you had actions that seemed to pull in the opposite direction, like President Trump offering to mediate on Kashmir.
Which India considers strictly a bilateral issue with Pakistan, a non-starter for mediation.
And the perception, rightly or wrongly, that the Trump administration was sometimes sidestepping India to deal with Pakistan, India's longtime rival, that must have grated.
Immensely. You see the conflicting signals India was getting. The U.S. wants India as this key strategic ally, this democratic anchor against China, but then takes diplomatic or trade steps that directly alienate or frustrate New Delhi. There's a quote from Naval Sarna in our sources.
Oh, yes.
He basically said, even those who have engaged in the diplomatic legwork themselves despair over the direction of meat.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. It just highlights this fundamental challenge for India.
Yeah.
How do you build deep trust with a partner whose actions can sometimes feel like they undermine your own interests?
It's a constant calculation, a
Right.
question of strategic trust, absolutely.
And all these complexities, these mixed signals from the U.S. relationship, they really feed into this core idea of India's foreign policy,
Feeds out.
strategic autonomy.
It underscores why India tries so hard to maintain its independence. Which leads us perfectly into how India handles its other massive and sometimes equally tricky relationships, particularly with China and Russia. It really is an art, this balancing act. Let's talk China. The relationship there is, well, famously complex. Our sources mention that informal summit Modi held with Xi Jinping in Mamallapuram, a 3-day deep dive.
Yes, that was quite something,
Yeah.
especially considering the history, like the Doklam standoff in 2017.
Right, that tense border dispute could have easily blown up.
It could have. And that informal summit showed Modi trying a different, more personal approach despite those underlying tensions.
But the tensions are real, aren't they? Beyond just border incidents.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Connecting the dots, India has major worries about China. There's deep suspicion about the Belt and Road Initiative, especially the parts going through disputed territory like Kashmir.
And economically.
A huge issue is the trade imbalance. It's just
Mhm.
massive. The sources mention India importing something like $14 billion worth of goods from China in just 1 month, March.
14 billion in a month.
Yeah, up from $4 billion the year before. India is desperate for China to open up its markets more to Indian products to try and level that playing field somewhat.
And beyond trade, geopolitically.
Growing concern. India watches China's actions in the South China Sea, what it sees as aggressive behavior, and China's increasing influence in India's own neighborhood, in countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Pakistan. It
Yeah.
feels a bit like encirclement.
Okay, so a very wary eye on China. Now, let's switch gears to Russia. A very different dynamic there, right? Much longer history.
Very different. Long-standing, strong defense ties, primarily. This relationship goes way back.
And the prime example highlighted is India buying the S-400 missile system from Russia.
Yes, the S-400 deal.
That was done despite the threat of U.S. sanctions under that GATSA law.
Correct. It was a major statement. India basically signaling it wouldn't let potential U.S. sanctions dictate its defense procurement, especially from a trusted long-term partner like Russia.
And Russia's role as an arms supplier is still huge.
Hugely important. Historically, something like 75% of India's military hardware has come from Russia, according to our sources. It's not just about buying weapons. There's a deep historical trust there.
And it's not just defense, is it? There are economic goals, too.
Right. They're aiming for $30 billion in bilateral trade by 2025. It's significant. This whole relationship with Russia, it's Exhibit A for India's strategic autonomy.
It really shows they're determined to carve their own path, not be forced into choosing sides.
Exactly. Unwilling to be dictated to by any single power.
Now, something intriguing came up in the sources about Modi's personal style, described as his secret weapon, his ability to connect with foreign leaders.
Ah, yes. That personal diplomacy element is quite fascinating.
How does that actually work in practice? Is it just photo ops, or does it achieve real things?
Well, the argument is it allows him to keep this complex, multi-vector foreign policy ticking over. Think about those informal summits with Xi. They weren't just standard meetings.
Right, the Mamallapuram one you mentioned?
They were designed to build personal rapport. The idea is that this personal connection can help manage tensions, allow for frank conversations, maybe de-escalate things, even when underlying policy disagreements are huge, like smoothing over the rough edges.
So it helps India to balance these competing relationships without getting totally isolated, even if its trade policies, for example, cause some friction.
That seems to be the thinking, using personal charm, perhaps, to navigate choppy diplomatic waters, building a bridge where policy might otherwise create a gap.
Okay, so that's the complex external picture. Let's pivot now to the domestic front. Because alongside all this foreign policy maneuvering, Modi has this really grand vision for India's economy, for transforming the country internally.
He does. It's a huge part of his platform. Our sources talk about the vision for a new India, originally targeted for 2022, which shows the scale of ambition and the goal of becoming a $5 trillion economy.
$5 trillion! That's enormous! And to get there, his government has pushed through some massive reforms, haven't they?
Absolutely. Some really big structural changes.
We're talking things like the Goods and Services Tax, the GST, back in 2017. That aimed to unify India's complex state and central taxes.
A monumental undertaking, the GST.
Then there was demonetization in 2016, pulling those big currency notes out. Hugely controversial, but aimed at tackling black money.
Very
Yep.
controversial, yes.
Mhm.
And then you've got a new bankruptcy code
Right.
trying to sort out bad debt issues.
A big push for digital payments, too, right? Trying to formalize the economy.
Massive push there. And huge investment in infrastructure. The sources highlighted road construction up by something like 66%. That's a visible change.
So the overall aim seems clear. Improve the ease of doing business, tackle corruption, build modern infrastructure, unleash India's potential.
The intent is definitely there. Big, bold reforms.
Hmm.
But, and this is a crucial but that comes through in the analysis,
Yes.
there's often this gap between the headline policy announcements and the messy reality of implementation on the ground and the actual economic impact.
Right. And despite the vision and the reforms, India's been facing some serious economic headwinds lately. The sources use this phrase, bullying of bullying.
Yes, that metaphor captures the tough environment businesses can face.
And the data seems to back that up. GDP growth slowing down.
Falling to 5%, which was cited as the lowest in 6 years at the time of the analysis.
Unemployment hitting a 45-year high? That's staggering.
A deeply concerning figure. Plus, weak private investment companies just weren't investing enough. And consumption, people buying things, was also declining.
And foreign direct investment, FDI, which is so important, that was falling too.
FDI inflows saw a decline between 2018 and 2023 after a period of growth. That signals maybe less confidence from international investors.
So what's behind this? What constitutes the bullring?
It refers to those deeper, persistent issues. Things like excessive red tape. Getting approvals can still be a nightmare for businesses.
Bureaucracy.
Exactly. Then there are real difficulties with land acquisition. Trying to get land for factories or infrastructure projects can get bogged down for years in legal and political battles.
And the workforce. India has this huge young population, but
But a large portion remains unskilled, not quite ready for the needs of modern industry. That's a major bottleneck. And reforms don't happen evenly. The pace varies hugely between different states in India, which can slow down national progress.
so when you see falling consumption, that must be directly linked to that high unemployment figure. People just don't have the money or the confidence to spend.
Precisely. It's a vicious cycle, or a domino effect. If people aren't buying, businesses don't invest, they don't hire.
And adding to this complex domestic picture is India's stance on trade, isn't it? Still quite protectionist in some ways.
Yes. The reluctance to join RCEP, that big Asian trade pact, was a significant decision. And continued high tariffs on many goods.
Which ties into the Make in India initiative trying to boost domestic manufacturing.
It does. The goal is laudable, boost local production, create jobs. But the protectionist approach can also make imports more expensive, potentially stifle competition, and make it harder to integrate into global supply chains.
So it creates this real tension, doesn't it? Can India hit that $5 trillion target and become a global economic powerhouse while maintaining these protectionist walls and battling these internal challenges like bureaucracy and land issues?
That is the fundamental question hanging over India's economic model right now. It's a huge challenge.
So wrapping this up, we've really taken a deep dive into India's incredibly complex situation. This constant balancing act, juggling these powerful global relationships, often with directly competing interests, while at the same time pushing for this massive internal transformation, all against the backdrop of some pretty serious economic headwinds.
It's dynamic, it's unpredictable. A nation truly trying to forge its own unique path in this increasingly multipolar world.
Which leaves us, and you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on.
Indeed. It raises this important question. Given all these complexities, the intricate foreign policy dance, the significant domestic economic hurdles, how long can India keep up this multi-vector balancing act without eventually having to make clearer choices, perhaps firmer alignments? Or is this very balancing act, this determined strategic autonomy, actually the most innovative, maybe even the only viable path for India to secure its future as a major global power in the 21st century?
A really provocative question to think about as we watch India continue to navigate its remarkable and often surprising journey. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you're walking away with a clearer, maybe more nuanced perspective on the incredible forces shaping one of the world's most vital nations.